5 seconds to the open. You ready?
Who wants to get this thing started right about now?
Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly with your host, Jerry Robinson.
Welcome.
Not just some guru.
Oh, really?
Your host is an economist and a best-selling author.
What an interesting news item. I'd better write that down.
And just someone who likes to make money and help you to make money. Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly. And here he is, Jerry Robinson.
Friends, welcome to you all around the world. Welcome to Follow the Money Radio. So grateful to have you here. My name is Jerry Robinson, as you heard, an economist and also the founder here at followthemoney.com. Great to have you along for the ride. Today, we're going to be talking about paper money. Paper money, and it's really kind of bizarre as we look around the world and we see that the entire world today is awash in paper money. And, we all take it for granted, don't we? We all just assume, well, of course, paper is money. I mean, the governments print paper and they put funny looking people on them and they put numbers on them and we all use them. So after you've been around the block for a while, you start to understand that that's how money works in the 21st century. That's where we are. That's where we live. It's interesting, though. I was talking to my 6-year-old son this week, and he just recently received his first really big toy money set. And so we've been playing lots of store, lots of Walmart kind of games at our house. And my son recently asked me why money was made of paper. And it was a really kind of interesting moment for me because I knew I was going to teach my son on this topic. I knew that this was something that I was going to have to explain to him about our monetary system, how it's debt-based, how it's fractional reserve, how it's made of, it's fiat, it's issued by fiat. There is nothing backing our money. I mean, of course, that's something that I'm going to have to teach my child. But the fact that he asked me this question, he said, why is money made of paper? And that really, when I answered his question, I thought to myself, how many people have actually asked that question in their lives? Why is money paper? Why have we decided to take our entire monetary system and turn it into pieces of paper as opposed to the times of old where we actually had sound money, where things with intrinsic value actually represented money? If you go back in the past, for example, you'll find that people long identified gold and silver. They also considered other types of, commodities that had intrinsic value as money. But we're different today. It's not just our generation. Paper money really began probably about 1,000 years ago in China. So China was the very first one that we know historically, from economic history, we can identify and say, okay, it looks like the Chinese were the very first ones to adopt paper money. And it didn't go real well. That experiment lasted for a little bit of time. And over time, we slowly but surely began to migrate towards these paper bills, paper money. And that's exactly where we find ourselves today. And in fact, just recently, in 1971, we had what was known as the Nixon shock. And that is the moment where President Nixon took practically the entire world off of the gold standard for our currency. So up until about 1971, the United States dollar was as good as gold. That is, you could trade it in for gold. But today, in our present situation, we live in an environment where the United States dollar, and all currencies for that matter, are not automatically convertible back into gold. And so therefore, they stand themselves as the legal tender, and there really is no other option. So you really can't convert them into gold and then use that gold officially. You really have to just transact within the paper money system that has been created. And what I told my son was, I said, look, first of all, why is money paper? it's because, first of all, it's easy, right? So it's easy to carry around paper. It's difficult to carry around gold and silver, especially if you were carrying around lots of money or trying to keep it safe. Paper bills just make a lot more sense from a utility standpoint. But we should also remember that just because something is currency doesn't necessarily mean that it's money. So currency is not necessarily money. Paper itself is not money. I mean, we all know that, right? You wouldn't go out and get a piece of paper and say, this is money. Of course not. I mean, it has to be an official piece of paper, of course. And that, of course, can be currency. But paper is not money, and it can be currency. But here's the thing. Here's the whole thing about money and paper and all of this. Whatever a society collectively decides to use as their currency, that will ultimately prevail. And in the United States of America and in most other countries of the world, they have decided that what they want to use as money is a piece of paper, an official piece of paper that actually serves as money. So the problem with our paper monetary system that we have today is that it is not backed up by anything. So there really is no foundation for the paper money systems that we have, whereas in the past, they were backed up by tangible, real items, commodities. In the case of the United States dollar, it was backed up by gold until 1971 on the international level. But when we look at the paper money today that we have, what we find out is that it's debt-based. I mean, you can prove this by pulling out a dollar bill from your wallet and looking at the very top and center of the dollar bill, and you'll see that it says Federal Reserve Note. So each dollar is actually a piece of debt, and that debt is issued by who? Well, it tells you, by the Federal Reserve, and it's a note or loan made by the Federal Reserve. So it must be paid back to who? It must be paid back to the Federal Reserve. And because it's a loan, it's going to be paid back with interest. So it's debt-based money. It's a very, very different form of money than we have ever had throughout time. So we live in a debt-based monetary system. Additionally, the monetary system that we have today is also known as fractional reserve. I don't want to bore you with lots of economic terms in this brief podcast, but the fractional reserve aspect of our economy, of our system, basically allows banks to create money out of thin air through the issuance of bank loans. And so this, of course, is also a very novel kind of approach that modern economic man has taken with his money. In the past, this kind of fractional reserve banking was not even envisioned. I mean, this began, of course, with the Bank of England back in the 1600s, and it really began to gain steam in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, to where we have the system now, which is, completely unrecognizable from times past. It's become so gargantuan and so debt-laden that it's just simply astonishing. And we also have to remember that our current, monetary system is based upon fiat paper. And that is, our currency is issued by fiat or by government decree. So the paper money that we have in our wallets today is usable because everyone around the country is told that they must accept it, right? It is legal tender. It is against the law not to be willing to accept United States dollars for the payments, whether they're public or whether they're private. It's legal tender. And so you must be willing to transact within that currency. And so our debt-based monetary system is what it is. But as we've talked about here on this podcast many times, our debt-based system will ultimately fail because it's unsustainable. It's a debt-based system. And when the magic of compound interest is working for you, it may be good for you, right? It may actually work out for you. But when it's working against you, when compound interest is working against you, as it is in the case of the United States, it's only a matter of time before the debt load becomes too heavy to bear. We have a $22 trillion national debt. We have deficits that are not being addressed. We have entitlement programs that we have no way or plan to take care of. We have Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid programs that are, by all estimates, they're going to fail over the course of the next few decades. So we don't have a plan to take care of our economic future. And yet we continue to spend as if there's no problem, as if there's always going to be plenty of money to go around. And, right now, as we think about where we stand here in the United States with the debt levels being where they are, much of the problem that we face today are banks that have run amok. And in the case of the United States, we would really point our finger at the Federal Reserve Bank, which has really, through a lot of reckless policies, attempted to maintain the status quo in the stock market, right? So when the stock market begins to go down, you have this central economic planning unit known as the Federal Reserve that steps in and tries to alter the free market and tries to change what's happening so that the prices of stocks will just keep rising. So they constantly goose the stock market. They goose the bond market. They try to keep, this house of cards intact. And the problem is they're not going to be able to do it forever. And this is why we teach you about our 5 levels of financial freedom. This is why we teach you about the importance of owning, physical gold and physical silver and real assets. We talk about our PACE philosophy, PACE, which stands for precious metals. A stands for agriculture. C stands for commodities. And E stands for energy. These are real things. We live in a world that's very fake. Think about all the fake things that surround us today. We have fake money, right? The money is not real. I mean, it's practically wallpaper. I mean, you can't use dollar bills for any other purpose. It doesn't have any kind of intrinsic value. There is no value to a piece of paper, aside from whatever you can do with it. I mean, but the fact that the government backs it with its full faith and credit, that's what gives it value. But the problem is when that government is bankrupt, when that government is going bankrupt, when that government has no clue how to solve the problems that it faces, what good is that guarantee from that government? So we have fake money. We have fake food, right? We have fake food. Just walk down the aisles of a grocery store and all you're going to find is a bunch of fake food. I mean, if you look at what's inside, it's all of these synthetic chemicals and strange, bizarre ingredients that you can't even pronounce. We live in a fake world. Turn on the television and you'll find a lot of fake news and a lot of fake information, right? It's just a fake world. And so the fact that we have fake money shouldn't surprise us at all. I mean, we live in a fake world, so expect fake money. But you don't have to transact exclusively in fake money. I mean, you can actually begin to, take control of your financial situation and begin to slowly try to, buck the trend. And that's again, going back to our 5 levels of financial freedom. That's where you really begin to think outside the box and really realize where you're at and what's going on. There were a couple of interesting headlines I wanted to tell you about in today's podcast. And, because we're talking about paper money. And so one of the things that I noticed this week from the Federal Reserve was there was a story in the Investor's Business Daily, which is a paper I like to read, weekly paper. And the headline was Fed Game Changer, Policymakers Mull Anytime QE to Bolster the Stock Market and the Economy. Here's what it says. The Federal Reserve could be on the verge of an implicit whatever it takes moment. On Friday, San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly revealed that the Fed is considering using quantitative easing, or QE, more regularly, not just as a last resort. And so, in essence, what the Fed is kicking around right now is the idea of actually taking quantitative easing, their money printing scam that they use to bail out the rich and make the poor pay for it. They're actually looking at taking this and pushing it forward. They're actually saying, maybe we'll continue to use this because it was so successful. So in essence, what they did was they bailed out the rich. They gave money to all of these top corporations that needed money, that were tight on liquidity. They gave money to the banks. They bailed out the auto industry. I mean, they just bailed out all of these companies. They didn't give, the average person a bailout. They gave big, fat corporations bailouts, right? And the quantitative easing serves as a way to keep the money flowing, to keep the credit flowing. And so the fact that the Federal Reserve, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, a decade after the financial crisis, you would think they would be saying, okay, we're going to unwind our monetary policy. We're going to unwind all of that money printing we did. But instead, as they sit on $4 trillion on their balance sheet of government bonds and whatnot, now they're simply saying, you know what? If this works so well, we might just keep doing it, right? We might just print more money. So that should be no surprise, considering that the Federal Reserve is talking about keeping quantitative easing as a policy that they can use just any time they want to goose the stock market. I mean, that should be a huge red flag, to the average individual who is worried about his purchasing power. I mean, your money is being corrupted by inflation. The Bible has a lot to say about this. In my book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, I talk about how, money itself is certainly something that can be corrupted through, planned inflation. We saw this back in the ancient Roman world, where the currency was debased. It was supposed to be 100% silver coins, and slowly but surely they would dilute that down and use other inferior metals without really ever telling the public. And so it allowed them to inflate the currency and devalue the currency in the process. And so as we see this, we should all be obviously alarmed at where our country is going. This should not be acceptable to us, that the Federal Reserve can just print money anytime it wants to. What happened to this idea of a free market? What happened to this idea of allowing the market to do what it wants? And the fact is that the Americans will often complain about, in fact, one of the things you always hear is that people complain about China's central planning, all of the central planners in China, it's so communistic, But then when you look at the United States, what do you have? You just have central economic planning. I mean, how is it different? How is it different? I think we live in a world of, certainly here in the United States with our corporate controlled media, we live amid a bunch of propaganda. And so we think certain things that aren't necessarily so, right? And that's certainly the case here in the United States, where we have heard that we really value the free market and, we're all about free market economics. But when you really kind of scratch down beneath the surface, you'll find out that's not really what our leaders really value. There's a whole lot of central economic planning that goes on, and it really thumbs its nose at the idea of free markets. I mean, so anyway, for whatever that's worth. There's an interesting story I also wanted to tell you about, in addition to this one from the Investors Business Daily, and that is the latest information we received, the gold demand trends for 2018 from the World Gold Council. And I'm looking at the report here, and it shows that central bank demand for gold, now, central banks, these are the banks that practically issue the money. They're the ones who practically control the economies of all of the different nations. So every nation has its own central bank. In Europe, it's the European Central Bank. In Russia, it's the Central Bank of Russia. In China, it's the same thing. So everybody's got their own central bank, and the central banks kind of control the monetary policy, their interest rates, and all of this in their countries. And so if you take a look at all the central banks, these big, top, powerful banks in each of the different countries, you would expect that their buying of gold would not necessarily be that high, considering that they tell us on a regular basis that gold is nothing but a relic, right? It's a barbarous relic, to quote John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist of the last century. But when we look at the actual central bank demand in 2018, we find that it was at the highest level since Nixon closed the gold window back in 1971. So central bank demand in 2018 was enormous. Central bank net purchases reached $651 trillion in 2018. That was 74% higher than the previous year in 2017. So we're talking about massive amounts of gold buying going on by central banks. Now, why would the central banks buy gold, right? Considering that we have this wonderful recovery that's intact, we're 10 years away from the financial crisis. There really shouldn't be this desire to purchase gold at the central banks, especially considering that it's not an important metal according to the financial world, right? You don't need gold is what they'll tell you on Wall Street. You need lots of paper assets is what Wall Street will tell you. You need lots of debt securities is what you need, but you don't need any physical gold, Wall Street will tell you. Meanwhile, the central banks are doing what? They're buying up what? Lots of gold. It's the same thing It's the same thing that that you'll find at the upper end of most of these corporations as well, especially on Wall Street. One of our advisors in our Christian Advisor referral is Barry James Dyke. We've had him on the program several times over the years. He wrote an incredible book that if you're a financial advisor, you just have to read it. It's called Pirates of Manhattan, I believe. And basically in this book, he shows how Wall Street kind of has a, it's good for us, but not good for you kind of mentality where, Wall Street pushes this concept of buy term and invest the difference because they want you to have lots of money to stuff into their mutual funds so they can get a bunch of fees from you. They don't want you giving your money to the insurance companies and getting guarantees, right? They don't want that to happen. They want you to put your money into the stock market and gamble and then pay them fees along the way. And so they push this idea of buy term and invest the difference, right? Well, when you actually look at the top corporate executives of these different Wall Street firms, what you'll find, and even whenever you look at the guys running the central bank like Ben Bernanke or Alan Greenspan or Janet Yellen, you'll discover that these people don't own term insurance, right? And they actually own whole life insurance, and they also own annuities. So they're putting their money in safe places where they have guarantees. Meanwhile, they're pushing on you the risky assets that many times they don't even want to hold themselves. So it's a real kind of it's good for me, but not good for you mentality that goes on. And so they're buying gold, right? Just like they're buying annuities, just like they own annuities, just like they own whole life insurance. But they tell you, no, you don't need any gold. You just use that fake paper money we gave you. And you don't need any whole life insurance because you don't want to own your insurance. You just want to rent your insurance and have it run out right before you need it. So therefore, you just buy term. And then you invest the difference where? You invest the difference into these good growth mutual funds that'll always provide you a great return over time. Well, you tell that to people who tried to retire in 2008, 2009, who didn't have a guarantee, like Mr. Bernanke had with his annuity, right? So long story short, what we're seeing here is something alarming. We see that the central banks are buying gold. They're scooping up lots of gold right now. And meanwhile, they're saying, oh, yeah, everything's fine, all clear. The recovery is completely intact and everything's fine. But at the same time, the Fed's also saying, yeah, we're probably going to have to do more QE and we want to be able to do it any time. And so you get in a real muddled picture here. In addition to all of that, we've also had some red flags, and we alerted our members about this in our last week's Robinson report. Auto loan delinquencies are on the rise. Got a record 7 million Americans who are 90 days or more behind on their auto loan payments. That's even higher than it was during the wake of the financial crisis back in 2008. So that's a huge red flag. We also have U.S. credit card debt now back at its 2008 peak, which around $870 billion in Q4 of 2018. We're also seeing new credit card inquiries, which is an indicator of consumer credit demand, declining to its lowest level seen in the history of the data, according to the Federal Reserve. We also had recently U.S. retail sales that hit the lowest level since 2009. And so on top of that, you have the central bank gold demand soaring 74%. And you have the Federal Reserve saying, hey, we think we want to start printing money anytime we want to, and we don't want to have a reason to do it. Right? We just want to be able to print money. So, I mean, where's all this leading? I mean, what's the end goal here? I mean, where is all of this heading? I would suggest to you that America is bankrupt. It's not going bankrupt. It is bankrupt, because bankruptcy is basically when you don't have enough money to pay all your bills. Try to think of the very last time that the United States was able to get through an entire year and pay for everything that it needed. It doesn't have that ability. And so it has to borrow, right? And it has to borrow. And then, of course, it has to pay interest on what it borrows. And it's borrowing from China, and it's borrowing from Japan, and it's borrowing from Europe. And we have no plan to pay any of this stuff back. So fact of the matter is that we have fake paper money that's backed up by nothing. We have central banks that are buying gold hand over fist while telling us that we really shouldn't own gold because it's really kind of a relic. We also have the central bank telling us that they want to print more money and do it anytime that they want to. And we have a lot of economic indications that tell us that something is afoul here, something is wrong. So we're not necessarily suggesting that the economy is going to crash tomorrow. But I'm telling you, I believe that the United States of America is bankrupt. And it's going to take some time, apparently, for the American people to understand this or to fully believe it. But they will. They will believe it. It will happen. We cannot delay the inevitable forever, so it is coming. So I would encourage you, as I guess a call to action on today's podcast, is just to, there you go, just take action, right? And one of the easiest ways you can do that is by going to our website, followthemoney.com/5 levels. And there, myself and my wife, Jennifer, have put together our 5 levels of financial freedom that walk you through every step of the way of what we did in order to break free financially. And so it begins in level 1, and you just begin there. And we've had so much great feedback over the years about our 5 levels of financial freedom. People from all over the world who have gone through it. You know, many people who think they're in a pretty good spot, they say, well, I've got plenty of money. I've got a good job. I don't need to do that. And they go back to level 1 and they find out, wow, there's a lot of things I haven't even thought of and I didn't even do to protect myself. So I would encourage you, followthemoney.com/5 levels. Once you realize that the economy that we have built is really on really shaky foundations, and once you begin to see that the leaders of our economy don't really know what they're doing, they're kind of making it up as they go, it really becomes incumbent upon you to take care of your family, to take care of yourself. It's on you. Washington is not going to save you. They're not going to bail you out unless you're rich, unless you're a billionaire, or unless you're running one of the Fortune 500 companies. Guess what? The government's not going to bail you out. And so who's going to bail you out? It's going to be you, yourself, and that's it, right? So it's time to take action. It's time to really stop listening to the corporate controlled mainstream media concoct brand new stories that you're supposed to be outraged about every single day. Instead, turn that off and start taking action in your own life to be able to be prepared for the days that are coming. Hi friends, Jerry Robinson here from followthemoney.com. You know, when I first started Follow the Money back in 2010, my goal was simple: to help as many people achieve financial liberty as I possibly could through education, information, and even private coaching. Today, nearly 10 years later, followthemoney.com has succeeded in this goal of helping everyday people just like you, not just in the United States, but around the world, get on the path to true financial freedom. And one of the most powerful methods that we have developed over the years of helping people just like you reach their financial goals is through our live Follow the Money Summit, where each year myself and the Follow the Money team gather before a live audience to teach the principles of true financial freedom. This year, I am more excited than ever about our upcoming 2019 summit, as my team and I have completely reconfigured our summit to ensure that every single person who attends will not only gain unique and powerful insights that could change their financial life forever, but that also promises that they leave with an action plan for success that they can execute upon for the rest of the year and even for the rest of their lives. Put simply, we have crafted this year's live event in such a way that it is impossible that anyone who attends can leave without having their financial lives radically touched and even changed. So what about you? Are you ready to take your financial life to the next level? Are you tired of feeling stuck in your finances? What you need is to attend this year's live Follow the Money Summit. When you register for the 2019 Summit, you'll be making an investment not only in yourself and your own financial education, you'll be making a major investment in your financial future. In addition to learning many new income and investing ideas, you will also meet other people just like yourself. There will be lots of time for networking, and we'll even have a private evening reception planned for all attendees, where I will be able to spend a little time with each of you to meet you individually and answer your questions. I'm committed to your financial success. Let Follow the Money help you take your financial life to the next level by making plans to attend this year's summit on May 31st. We're hosting this year's conference in a central U.S. location in beautiful Northwest Arkansas. That makes it easy for everyone to get to no matter where they live in the United States. This area actually sits on the world's 9th largest economy as it serves as the global headquarters for Walmart. Our summit will be held in the luxurious Embassy Suites Hotel and Spa. You'll live and eat like a king while learning and networking with many like-minded individuals from around the world. Make 2019 the year that you commit to achieving true financial liberty. Reserve your seat now for the 2019 Follow the Money Summit online by going to summit.followthemoney.com. Don't miss this year's incredible lineup of topics, speakers, and fun events that we have prepared for you. Come and be a part of the community by going online to summit.followthemoney.com and reserve your seat today. And I'll look forward to meeting you at this year's summit. All right, friends, well, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of our program each and every week right here at followthemoney.com. And I want to leave you with a final word, as I always do, this time taken from the book of Proverbs, chapter 20, verse 10, where it says, "Diverse weights and diverse measures, they are both alike an abomination to the Lord." You know, in the times of ancient Israel, the idea of abusing money and using it to be able to plunder the people was considered to be completely immoral. Likewise, our modern fiat currency systems, in which the currency is backed by nothing and its value can be manipulated at will, is by definition an unjust weight. And so therefore, by any biblical definition, fiat currency systems are clearly unjust systems. And that's just something to think about. Remember, friends, when you want the truth about the global economy, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and we'll see you right back here next time. Until then, God bless.
All of the information contained on the Follow the Money podcast is strictly for informational and educational purposes. It should not be construed as specific investment advice. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors, including Tom Cloud, are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of ftmdaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry Robinson does hold an insurance license and at times may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Follow-up, individualized responses to email or phone requests that involve the rendering of personalized investment advice for compensation will not be made absent compliance with state investment advisor registration requirements or an applicable exemption or exclusion and applicable insurance regulations. Past performance is not indicative of future results. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on the podcast. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always consult a trusted financial professional before making any financial decisions.